Welcome to the public hearing of January the 30th, 2024, and I'm now calling to reconvene this meeting to order. Now, this meeting is convened by electronic means. As such, council members may participate in person or by electronic means. For council members participating by electronic means, please ensure your video is turned on and let the clerk know if you leave the meeting for the purposes of confirming quorum. Council members are reminded that in accordance with section 14.13 of the procedure bylaw, members must enable their video to confirm quorum. If council members attending by electronic means lose connection during any portion of the hearing, we'll recess the meeting until the connection is restored. If council members lose connection during the voting process, team members will get you back online quickly while we suspend the voting process. The contact information has been circulated to you. Members of the public can view the proceedings via the live stream and YouTube link, which will be posted on X at Van City Clerk. I do want to acknowledge that we're hosting today's public hearing on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and I do want to thank them for their generosity and their hospitality and the love and care they show this land that we get to live, work, and play on. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to unlearn what we've learned in the past and learn the true history as to what's happened on these lands. And if we do that, we're going to build an amazing future full of love and prosperity and kindness for everyone. In case of an emergency, I'd also like to, where we need to evacuate the building, I'd like to direct your attention to the exits there, just through the glass doors. Hang a left by the post. And if that glass door is blocked, there are 4 exits on the sides of this chamber here. Walk, don't run, and please don't use the elevator. Might not be a good idea. I'd like to highlight there's a defibrillator at the end of the hall. So if we need one of those, let us know. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize all the contributions of our amazing team at the City of Vancouver. Look, we all in our chamber here, we have firsthand experience working with our team, and I can tell you they really care about our city. They work incredibly hard, and so proud to call you teammates. And so thank you for everything you do to make the city a lot better. Okay, can we please get a roll call?
Yes, Mayor Sim is in the chair. Councillor Carr. Councillor Kirby-Young. Councillor Dominato.
Present.
Councillor Bly is not here. Councillor Boyle is absent. Sends her regrets. Councillor Fry.
Present momentarily.
Councillor Montague. Councillor Klassen.
Present.
Councillor Meisner. And Councillor Jo.
Present.
The hearing has quorum, Mayor Sim.
Great, thank you very much. Now, before we begin, I'd like to make some announcements. The public may participate by speaking in person, by phone, or by submitting written comments to Mayor and Council. Speakers will have 5 minutes to make their comments and should limit their comments to the merits of the report being considered. Speakers should also state whether they are in support or opposed to the recommendations, and if they are a resident of Vancouver. Speakers may only speak once and should follow along on Twitter at Van City Clerk for updates on the progress of the meeting so they don't miss their turn to speak. Any comments on agenda items can be submitted in writing through our online web form at Mayor and Council Public Hearing Feedback web form. This link will also be tweeted. Those speaking on behalf of 4 or more persons or groups, including the speaker, will have 8 minutes to speak, and only if those represented are also on the line or in person, and must not be individual speakers themselves. I also want to note the City of Vancouver's longstanding commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, including utmost respect for all genders. I remind Council that when addressing speakers and team members, we'll avoid using gendered honorifics and will instead refer to the person by first and last name, role, or title. A reminder that Council's role at a public hearing is to be a quasi-judicial body, which means Council is to only consider the merits of the rezoning application or heritage designation. After hearing from speakers, Council may 1. Approve the application in principle, 2. Refuse the application, or 3. Refer the application to team members for further consideration. At the public hearing on January the 23rd, 2024, Council completed items 1 through 3, heard presentations, and began the question period to team members and applicant for item number 4. So, what we're talking about here is item number 4, CD-1 rezoning 2015 Main Street and 190 East 4th Avenue. While I made a first call for speakers on January the 23rd, I'm reiterating the first call for speakers. This is the first call for speakers. Any speakers for this item who wish to speak to council, please call toll free at 1-833-353-8610, followed by participant code 1061445# before the close of the speakers list. The phone number will be posted on X and made available on the live stream. Council will now continue item 4 with the second round of questions, noting this is the only opportunity for council to ask questions of the applicant. Councillor Joe is next on the queue to ask questions. Councillor Joe.
Mayor, point of privilege, Mayor.
Yep, sure.
Yeah. So as council be aware, I was unable to attend. I was on an LOA for the public hearing on review of this matter. The applicant referenced my wife's employer as a consultant a number of times. I wasn't aware of that in reading the report, and only picked up on that when I was watching the video. And out of an abundance of caution, I'm going to declare a conflict of interest on this matter on those grounds.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Okay.
Clerk, just to confirm, quorum is 6, right? Okay. We're fine. Great. Great. Thank you very much, Councillor.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Joe, you are up.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So I'm gonna continue with my question from last week. So this question is for staff. So I think one of the reasons why the requirement of the balcony is for the mental health and the well-being for the residents, right? So just wondering if this balcony requirement is unique for Broadway, or any other areas in the city also have this mandate or not?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Zhu. This is not unique to the Broadway plan area. It's actually captured in the high-density housing for families with children design guidelines, which are going to be under review as part of a broader review of apartment livability, with an eye on developing formalized policies around apartment livability that will trace that in. It is repeated in a few different places, but that's kind of where the meat of it is.
Okay, is the balcony also required in downtown Vancouver?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless otherwise stipulated in a district schedule, in which case sometimes a percentage of balconies may be enclosed. They're still considered balconies because they're typically non-conditioned space.
I see. Okay. Okay. So the other question, I ask the same question to applicant. I'm gonna ask for staff again. The other mass timber project, 18 storage, 17 storage. How do they handle this balcony situation? Do we know?
So all the other approved development permit applications for tall mass timber buildings in Vancouver do have balconies.
Okay, but for all the technical challenges, do we know how do they handle those challenges?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, for the technical challenge we heard last week regarding poking the holes on the building. So how do they handle the challenges for the other two projects?
So there's a number of different ways of handling balconies on buildings in any material. You can have inset balconies, you can have cantilevered balconies. There's different ways of attaching that are going to be, it's up to the designers to find the best solution for their project. But the other mass timber projects use a combination of different types of balconies.
Okay, thank you. My last question is for the applicant. So I realize there's no residential parking in this building. I think you mentioned that there are parking lots in other areas in that neighborhood. So can you elaborate a little bit more? What does that mean? Can we help?
Yeah, this building is part of Main Alley, which is a series of buildings in that precinct, which
Okay.
I showed you a photo of before, a bunch of digital industry and industrial buildings. And there's parking available in those buildings, and there are some designated stalls. How many? 6, I think it is? Handicap stalls? Yeah, we have 6 accessible stalls that are designated for this building and the
Okay.
neighboring building as well.
So that means the residents can park in other building, which they have to do that by themselves, negotiate with other parking.
No, same owner.
Same owner, okay.
Same owner owns all of the buildings.
Okay, perfect. And my last question is, are you willing to explore options to offer such as a free transit pass for the residents in the building to complement the fact that there's no residential parking in this building.
Well, our client will look at it.
Okay.
We'll look at it.
It's possible,
Yeah.
possible, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. That's all my
Can I
questions.
talk about the balcony issue?
Yeah, please.
Briefly, do
Sure.
you mind?
Yeah, please.
Okay, I just want to bring up one thing about the issue of balconies in relationship to this project. Sometimes there are projects that are technically challenging, and they're innovating in certain ways in relationship to sustainability. For example, right now, we're doing the Cole Harbor social housing project with the city as our client, which is under construction adjacent to the community center, which I designed 25 years ago. And it has no balconies. It is a family social housing project. The city hired us, and it has 58% family units. It has 28% of the outdoor space using this new 2 meter per squared calculation method, which we've never heard before. And it was approved by the city. The reason why we did it is it's passive house. You can see a picture of it here. I think it's very pretty, and they're beautiful units, just like these other ones. So when there are overriding circumstances of innovation in relationship to sustainability, water, or energy, then these things are done only in specific circumstances. And if some other architect wants to take the risk on poking through the membrane to do these sorts of things, I can't comment on that, other than it has not been executed in the city of Vancouver, to my knowledge.
Yeah, that's fair. Thank you for the answer. That's all my question. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, I have a question, and I think I'll direct it both to the applicant and staff, who I think might respond with some different context. And that's really around, we have a proposal in front of us from staff that meets policy, including balconies. We have an alternative proposal from the applicant with citing kind of new building innovation and concern about sort of longevity and in sort of the structural integrity, and that alternate proposal involves providing 50% of what would be the required balcony area. So I'm wondering, and I'd like to hear from both parties on this, around the ability to offset the reduction in balcony space through discussion around additional public benefits that might be in accordance with the Broadway plan. And for example, I know the Broadway plan public benefit strategy is extensive, but it has a lot of breadth and flexibility and potential, from parks and open spaces to arts, culture, and heritage, and a number of pieces. So who would like to go first? Because I'd like to hear from both the applicant and staff on that.
Engineer. I'd like to just quickly touch on the technical aspects of balconies in response to your question, just noting that we know that balconies are technically possible, as we've seen from the other applications in Vancouver and international examples. There can be challenges. There can be design and detail challenges that need to be solved, and those can come with costs. I think to the other part of your question, I'll hand it over to Yardley McNeil.
For the question, Yardley McNeil, Director of the Rezoning Center. With respect to the adding public benefits to the application, we would recommend that council refer the application back to staff so that discussion could happen in the regular course of the protocols, which is to vet out the need of public benefits in the areas, bring it to senior staff for review, and then cost that out, let the applicant know what that cost is so they know what the implications are to their project, and then bring that forward in a revised report to council.
Okay, I'll ask a follow-up after that, but I'm going to go with the applicant first.
Can I address a little bit of that?
Sure.
Okay, in terms of the policy, the 2 meters per square foot per unit, it's something I talked with my staff, and we do more buildings than most in the city. We've never heard of it before this, like this requirement. If you took that 2 meters per square foot and applied it to my social housing project for you guys at Cole Harbor, we meet 28% of that required area. Like this, our current proposal meets 50% of that required area. This is something that isn't written down anywhere, that has been pulled out from ex nihilo, from nowhere. And so we don't understand it. We don't think there's a referral back to staff with a public benefit discussion. We think this is unjust.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm going to follow up, and maybe I can ask Doug from planning to follow up on this one, because just to set the stage on the question around the public benefits piece, I had sent an inquiry into staff, which resulted in me crafting a motion that I might potentially bring forward that I circulated to all of council. And so perhaps receive some different information than what we just heard here about the need to refer, that council could give direction potentially around discussing potential additional public benefits for the applicant. So can I get some clarity from staff on that?
So Doug Smith, Acting General Manager, PDS. It would be difficult for staff to go back and negotiate any new public benefits without clear direction from council. So it would almost be kind of starting back like the way Yardley described it earlier. So it would be, I would prefer if we did get referred back to the conversation as opposed to how it is in the amendment right now.
Okay, do we not have precedent of council having given similar direction before where leaving the discussion, the negotiation, the discretion of staff, but approving with conditions?
No, I don't believe so.
I'm happy to maybe come back and I can ask that through a point of information later. I'd love to get more information back on that. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Mayor.
Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Bly. No, she's not online. Okay. Councillor Meisner.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Question for staff. It was mentioned by the applicant about the Cole Harbour Social Housing Building. I had a similar question around that project, understanding that it is has many family units. Although it is social housing, it is predominantly a family. It's targeted at families and is also above the school. So I'm just wondering, why was an allowance made there to that particular project?
I can't speak to particulars of the application beyond what I know broadly about it. And the most important element of it is that it's non-market housing. The project before you today is a market development with a certain amount of below-market units. In the case of the Cole Harbour development, it is a 100% social housing building.
So maybe you can explain to me the rationale for accepting non-market or social housing units without balconies and saying, okay, that's fine for non-market buildings, but if it's a market building, then they must have a balcony. I just would be curious to know why social housing units don't require balconies.
That's a valid question, and we always start from the position of they should have balconies, especially for the family unit sizes. But in the case of that particular application, and again, I can't speak to the particular negotiations that went through that application, but if I were to surmise, it would be a combination of factors. One of which being the fact that it was funded by public dollars, the fact that each unit has Juliet balconies, not dissimilar to this application, and the passive house status of that development.
Okay. Okay, so that's a passive house. This one's a mass timber, so some sustainability comparison there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Another question for you. It's been mentioned there's other examples in Vancouver that have been approved, mass timber buildings with balconies, but have any of them actually been constructed?
So one is under construction currently. That's the community building at Burrard and Davie. I understand that there was a soil turning ceremony at that site relatively recently. And so that is the one that is well underway now. The other project where it is approved at DP, we had a conversation recently with the developer of that site, and they intend to move forward with their application with some amendments.
Okay, so that one at Davie and Burrard community has balconies?
Yes.
Okay, that's good to know. And then it's also been mentioned about a referral back to staff. I'm just wondering how much delay that would potentially cause. Like, what does that process look like in terms of timeline?
It starts off with a discussion with all of the groups that are involved in delivering and securing public benefits. So that's ACCS, planning, engineering, and the like, and determining what they consider to be the appropriate ask for this property, having that costed out, and then brought to a decision for recommending one versus others, essentially. That has to then be shared with the applicant for obvious reasons, for them to know what their obligation would be, because it would be a condition of rezoning to deliver it. And then determining with them if they wanted to continue to proceed on, we'd need to amend the report, essentially, and rebroadcast that out to the neighborhood, to the public, so they could see the difference here. It may require referring it again, secondly, to the public hearing, and then moving on. So we're talking about multiple months here. It could be probably 4 months minimum,
Okay.
5 before you got back with it.
Okay, okay, so minimum 4-month delay. Okay, that's useful information. Thank you.
Good. Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Clausen.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to kind of follow on a thread started a little bit by Councillor Kirby-Young. So some discussion, it appears in the amendment that she has brought forward to us here for council's awareness, that there was some discussion around potential public benefit opportunities here. And the reason this was arrived at is simply the actual removal of the balcony spaces allows for a little bit more living space within the units. That translate into maybe a nominal, in the grand scheme of things, a nominal difference in terms of that could be translated into a public benefit. So first of all, is the main alleyway activation considered to be a public space? Sorry, the alleyway that's beside the building that is sort of commonly between the.
Thanks for that question, Senior Rezoning Planner. I think you're talking about the space between 4th and 5th, where they hold a series of events.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not considered a public benefit.
It's not, but is it public space? Would it be accessible to public?
Yes, that's right. There is public access and public space to access.
And so I don't know what is going to be there, but it abuts the building, right? It's
That's
actually
right
next to it. I mean, here I'm not trying to sort of put things in front. I'm just trying to sort of think this through here. We clearly want to see this application move forward and under the right conditions. We've heard the concerns about the balconies. I think council are kind of hearing about that, but we've also been sort of given some feedback from staff that we could possibly look at some public benefit that would come in return for the exemption around the balconies. And so I'm just trying to figure out why all of a sudden that doesn't seem to be a tenable option.
I mean, I might pass that to Yardley, but my understanding with the amendment was that there would be an opportunity to consider a public benefit on this site. And I think what you reference is not necessarily a public benefit related to this site, and it wouldn't be, because it's already existing and it's not.
So not the general public, but the public, the publicly available within the tenants of the building.
Forgive me, I'm trying to understand your question. So maybe can I ask you to reframe it?
Sure. You just said that the main street was, the main alleyway there was not considered to be a public benefit for?
There's public access, but it's
public
not
access.
benefit. Yeah, it's a lane. It's a lane, Councillor.
Okay. Again, I'm just, my biggest concern right now is that we would have to extend this or draw this thing out here, but we would obviously like to see this move forward. But I'm trying to figure out where staff are at in terms of potentially giving direction to negotiate some value of public benefit that would result from the compromise on the balconies.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, I think Council's asked an important question here, and I think Councillor Kirby-Young had asked a question about this as well. And what I would recommend for Council to get clear advice on this is that if we could take a recess and convene, we do have legal services here. We want to make sure we're giving you a clear answer. There are some complexity to this notion of, at this stage, trading off balconies for an additional public benefit that has not been quantified at this stage. That is not something that typically happens. So we want to make sure that we're giving you clear advice. I would recommend that if you could give us 5 minutes just to confer, and then we can answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
So we're going to take a recess for.
I've got a minute left, so you've got 60 seconds, and then we'll go to our research. So is that okay?
Sure.
Mahmoud Biazi from Westbank. Just wanted to add here, we have already, first of all, we would like to move ahead with the application. We don't want to delay this. We're looking at 210 rental units, and I don't believe going back to staff, again, to renegotiate this as an issue is going to be a short segue. It will be longer, and it's basically delaying the project, and then we'll have to look at other avenues to see how we can actually make sense of this project. But in terms of what the project is offering right now, we do have a 20% affordable, the whole building is rental, and also that includes a 20% below market component attached to it. And one thing we didn't also bring up is that the balconies that we added, the communal balconies we added on the back of the building to the north side, which will have amazing views to the city, those are very intentional, and they're very intentional to the design of the building. And we believe they'll be used very much. And yeah.
We're at time, but we are going to take a recess to confer. So thank you. taking. All right, the recess is over. We're back. Seeing no one in the queue, I don't know. Sorry, sort of point of procedure here. We're kind of leaving this hanging here. Do I ask the city manager for any comments, or?
If council's amenable, we're happy to provide some further clarity on this point, and I'll ask Jeff to speak to it. Thanks.
Jeff Greenberg, Assistant Director of Legal Services. I just wanted to go through for you some of the options with respect to the amendment and how you could proceed. So your first option is, of course, to approve the application with the conditions as written, which would include the private balconies as per condition 1.1. Your second choice is to make an amendment along the lines, excuse me, of what Councillor Kirby-Young proposed, which would be to reduce the balcony space to 50%. The third choice would be to amend the condition as per Westbank's proposal, which was essentially to remove the private balconies in their entirety and to have the communal balconies and other outdoor space as proposed. The next choice is as proposed by Councillor Kirby-Young, which was to look at whether or not there were additional public benefits as a result of reducing the private balconies to either 50% or less than that. The issue that has been raised in that regard is the amendment talks about having those public benefits then determined by staff outside of the public hearing. And what we would recommend to you instead of that is that if you wanted to have that public benefit assessment done, you should refer the application back to staff, which will require, in all likelihood, that staff have conversations with the applicant with respect to the costs and what they're willing and able to deliver, et cetera. And that will trigger a new public hearing for you then to make the determination of the public benefits, but not to delegate that decision outside of the public hearing process to staff, the GM of PDS, and the GM of real estate and facilities. So those are the choices as I would recommend them to you. Of course, there are quite a number there, but that's the best advice I can give you at this time during the public hearing process. And of course, I'm happy to answer questions if you have any.
Okay, is that as clear as, is that clear to everyone?
Don't say mud, Mayor.
I was about to, and then I realized that this is a very formal meeting, so I did not do that. Is that clear to everyone? So it's actually not it's not super clear to me yet. So option one is approve as written. Two, amend, and then we could and then reduce the balconies by was it reduced by half? Three, and now this is the one I was a little unclear on, was amend the condition as presented by the developer.
Yes, I believe West Bank provided to you their form of amendment.
And then the fourth was the option around additional public benefits, and the long and the short of it would be referred back to staff or team members, which would then trigger another public hearing after everything's said and done.
Yeah, the only variation, Mayor, on that point is if staff needs to talk to the applicant about how those public benefits would be figured out, then it would trigger a new public hearing. If staff was somehow able to calculate that and bring back a recommendation without any discussions with the applicant, then it could simply just come back to you with that additional information at a later time for you to consider.
Okay. can I ask a question? Actually, do I have to go in the queue here? And actually, it'd be for team members. Here. Is this appropriate? Just because I think we're trying to clarify everything. Is that okay if I ask a question? Yeah, I'll get on the queue here. Is that, sorry.
I can answer that, sure. So we have done 2 sets of asking questions of staff and the applicant. The next part of the process would be to go to speakers after we're finished with this question period. And once we hear from speakers, part of the next steps in the process is to, again, be able to ask questions of staff, but can no longer ask questions of the applicant at that point. All right. That would be correct unless council decided to vary or suspend the rules and have a 3rd round of questions.
Fine, I can wait. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So I just have a very quick question for our team members here. Based on your experience, if option 4 did happen, which is looking for additional benefits and our team members go back, what is the likelihood or how probable is it that there could be some resolution without talking to the applicant? Is that a low probability or a high probability?
Thank you for the question. We think it is incredibly troublesome in order to arrive at a recommendation for council that is viable for the applicant without having vetted it through them first. We have heard from them this evening or this afternoon that their project is as much as they can deliver, essentially, which is the market rental with 20% below market rental and a 10 or 11 communal balconies. Anything that exceeds that in their performa, and their performa did net out that situation as well, that adding another obligation onto the property is unlikely to be viable for them. So for us to invent or identify a public benefit that would have a cost associated with it, it would be folly for us to bring this to you without knowing for certain that the applicant could afford to do that, that this project could afford to do it. Sorry, not the applicant.
I'm going to try and be very clear as I can. The public benefit on this project, which is not required by the Broadway plan, is that it's a prototype, open source, net zero, hybrid, mass timber tower. That's something that's not required. And what we would prefer is for council tonight to decide if you want it or not, as it is. And so we have an amendment which we gave you that would delete the balconies and put on the other additional balconies on the back, which is what our proposal. And if you don't want it, then vote as per staff's original request is to add the balconies, and we will go to a concrete building with balconies. There's no more money left in the kitty for more public benefits. This project barely pencils out as it is. It's our developers' goodwill gesture to the community to do something really meaningful and to make a real powerful statement about the potential of architecture to be net zero and to do something with open source mass timber hybrid construction to create jobs as well in this province. And then we're hopeful that you can see the merits of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dominato.
Thank you, Chair. And if I'm still permitted to ask a question to the applicant, I just want to clarify one point there. What I heard is that if council were to accept the staff recommendations at this time, that this build would move to a concrete build. no mass timber. And I'm just curious if the applicant could just explain that, because my understanding was that this is partially funded through the province as a pilot mass timber project. So what would that mean in terms of the partnership with the provincial government? Would the province claw back that funding? Would it no longer be part of the pilots that they have underway? Can you just expand on that? I just want to be really clear in terms of our decisions this afternoon and the implications of that.
We were given $500,000 to do research into hybrid mass timber construction with the hopes of developing this project. That money's all been spent, and there's no more government funding in place. That was research money which was spent on consultants, fire protection experts, testing. We burnt a whole bunch of different prototypes and did fire testing to make sure this thing would be safe with life safety. And so that money's been spent. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that point. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And unfortunately, I do have to cede the chair as I have another commitment for civic business.
Okay, everybody. I think we have now concluded questions in the second round that was moved by council. So we will now move to hear speakers. Just confirming that did Mayor Sim do the second call for speakers? Not yet. Okay, so I'll confirm that this is the second call for speakers, and any speakers that wish to speak to this item and speak to council can call toll-free 1-8333-353-8610, followed by participant code 1061445# before close of the speakers list. The number is available on X and also on the live stream. Any speakers in the council chamber can come forward to the podium. And a reminder that all speakers will have 5 minutes to make your comments, and please limit your comments to the merits of the specific application being considered tonight. So now hear from the public, and our first registered speaker tonight is Stephen Bohus, who I see is here in person. Can I get you to, there you go, you got a mic now, go ahead.
There's another speaker here who has to leave in a minute or has to leave soon, and I'm just wondering, she's wondering if she could be first.
Just a second, please. Okay, it would require the goodwill of council to move to vary the speakers list. I know that we try to stick to it normally because people are expecting their turn, but it's up to the will of council if anybody would like to move to vary the agenda. Okay, and sorry, speaker, your number is
3, I think. My name is Jean Kwan. Oops.
your speaker 14. Okay, so moved and seconded. All in favor? Seeing none opposed? Okay. Thank you. We will start with Jean Kwan, and you have 5 minutes when you're ready. Please go ahead.
On your marks, get set, go. Thank you so much. I live in the neighborhood at 234 East 5th Avenue and have lived there as an owner and resident since 2000. So I believe that's 24 years almost. And I appreciate hearing about the public benefits, and I have a small understanding of the Broadway plan. And when I hear about public benefits, I also want to know what's being addressed in terms of public harm, in terms of residents in the neighborhood, owners and renters. The density in the area is increasing all the time, and that's okay because I understand it's a high density area, but the height of the building far exceeds in, I think, about the 6-block immediate radius of where we live, anything that currently exists. And I mean, the no parking thing is obviously an issue because our alleys are already extremely full. There have been accidents that have happened. there's just a number of things, but I just really wanted to say that it's the height of the building that is really troublesome for me as an owner. And I do also understand that there were a number of people who didn't receive their notification about the hearing that was last week until the night before, and were not able to make that, to make any comments or to attend the meeting as a result. So my hope is that with all the things that council is considering, that there will potentially be another public hearing so that people have an opportunity who live in the neighborhood to speak. Thank you so much. I strongly object the height of the building.
Great. Thank you for your comments and thank you for speaking to council. Okay, we will now go back to the beginning of the list with speaker number 1, Stephen Bohas.
And I do have a presentation. If I could have slide number 2. Just getting set up here. All right.
Okay, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Acting Mayor and Council. My name's Stephen Boas. I'm a Vancouver resident. I'm opposed to this rezoning. I'm a renter. I work with 3D graphics every day in the field of visual effects. And this slide shows a sample of what the proposed rezoning would look like from Main and 6, taken with a 50mm lens with a standard camera. And it gives you a feel of about the mass of the building, but the top third is missing, so that's how big it is. I'd like to compliment and commend staff on their condition for including balconies. This building, if you really look at it, looks like an office building. It does not look like a residential building. Next slide, please. On the left, you'll see a rendering with 2 towers. You really have to consider this with 2 towers in the FSR there because there's mention of that in the rezoning. And if you look at the right, previous slide back there, there's the Mount Pleasant implementation plan that I'll get back to. Slide number 4, please. The proposal has no private balconies. That's a big mistake. The communal balconies, every 3rd floor, don't work. And I really want to ask about what kind of rents are you looking at? 80% of the units here, like the unit there at the top, there should be no auto advance. Please advance manually. The renderings show great views. So slide number 5. If you look at the shadow studies in the report, there is no report doesn't have a date on the shadow study. It actually is from the longest day of the year with the shortest shadows, and from the summer solstice, and it's actually incorrect. I did the shadow study myself. You can compare it, and I'm just wondering, why this is still happening. If you look at the rezoning booklet, you'll see that West Bank's logo is at the bottom of the pages, but the beneficial owners of 2015 Main Property Incorporated are actually Ian Gillespie, Stephanie Dong, and Ryan Holmes, and this isn't stated clearly. Next slide. Again, for the other shadow studies for September 21st, they're incorrect, and it's so easy to double check online. And I really think you should be looking at shadow studies from like October 21st. I'm not advancing this, so we can go to the next slide, slide number 7. This is what staff have called the lower Queen Elizabeth Park view, cone view, which was the upper limit, and there was a change in the Broadway plan to raise the view cone height, so it's even higher than it used to be, and it used to be actually way down there with the Main and 6 view cone going in both directions before that got chopped. Next slide. In terms of the Mount Pleasant Implementation Committee, I was a volunteer. I used to live in Mount Pleasant. Mike Weeb was on it. Councillor Carr will recall this from her days on council on all the time that was spent on this plan, on the Mount Pleasant Community Plan and the implementation plan that was passed in October of 2013, and a huge amount of volunteer work. Next slide. Slide number 8. I will also mention that in terms of slide number 9, please. These are some of the outcomes of the plan that you revoked in 2022 in terms of saying 3 FSR for this part of Lower Main Street, maximum of 6 stories. Next slide. And I will mention that while volunteer time is free, but that does not make it worthless. And members of the community spent countless hours in what was supposed to be a 30-year plan And at an open house for the Broadway plan, staff told people, including myself, that it would coexist with the Broadway plan, and the implementation plan was scrapped. Next slide, please. Proposed tower is long and rectangular, blocks views. To the north, it's poor urban design. Next slide. And I've got some questions here in terms of what kind of land lift would happen, how would it be quantified, who would benefit. There are only 2 elevators, it's a lot of embodied energy moving things up and down. Who would provide the modular building materials? Is it next C? How is water damage handled? And I recall that 9 stories of the Vancouver house flooded. There are issues with district energy monopolies. Is it pet friendly? There's no parking. That's a big issue. The SATO studies are incorrect. And you really have to look at the impact of a second tower where FSR of 8 is maximum on the site and no upper rents at 80% of units. So I will ask council to sever the vote and vote on the balcony separately if this goes to a vote. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for your comments and for taking the time to present to council. Our second registered speaker is Louis Villegas, who I believe is also in person. There you are. Hi. Go ahead. You have 5 minutes when you're ready.
My name is Louis Villegas. I've been a resident in Vancouver for 39 years and a taxpayer for 36. Thank you, Council, for this opportunity to speak. I am opposed to this neighborhood busting bomb that belongs downtown, not in a neighborhood. I am an urban design specialist with projects completed in BC, Alaska, Oregon, California, and Utah. In Vancouver, I provided the concept plan for the Olympic Village pro bono to the city and designed Chinatown Square. Council, you do not perceive the trial that hangs over you. I mentioned at the last public hearing the dearth of leadership from the elected officials and the lack of capacity and planning as City Hall remains laser focused on landing towers. Something seeming to the exclusion of everything else, including a crisis in housing affordability and homelessness. Next slide, please. This is a Steve Buhas slide, an image created on the latest Hollywood software. It really is dot perfect. And quite frankly, I don't know how or why a tower like this is being built in this location in my neighborhood. When I was in architecture school, we used to talk about context. There's no context for this tower in this slide, in this terrific image. Council appears to have changed the federal definition of affordability from paying 30% of household income to own a home to renting below market rates, whatever that means, because market rates are a moving target. Households using up to 60% of their income on housing trigger a shell game of redirected money flows that may not be fully understood. When a household uses 60% of total income for housing, it moves half the money formerly spent in the local economy to the housing side of the equation, where bankers and developers then reinvest it in the global markets. Nothing stays in the place. Small businesses, the results, of course, are as predictable. Small businesses are faltering, and since the mom and pop shops employ 67% of Canadians, it means that the workforce is in trouble. What it all means is that we are through the looking glass into a new world where growth no longer pays for growth. We still get the towers blocking the sky, blocking the mountains, and blocking the water, but no revenues flow to government. With land prices hitting new highs, developers are demanding and getting concessions from the city. No balconies, 2 elevators serving 200 suites, no parking, no development fees. We saw this playing out in the first day of this public hearing when professionals engaged in a discussion about balconies, reminiscent of medieval arguments about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. We have been told that removing balconies was innovation. Of course, the balconies are needed. Balconies are integral to apartments, especially in tiny condo suites, if only for psychological relief. In fact, the smaller the unit, the larger the balcony should be. Next slide, please. So what passes for innovation today? Bachelor suites have been innovated into one-bedroom units. One bedrooms are now two bedrooms. And 800 square feet without a balcony is now family housing. So 800 feet is considered one unit suitable for 2.2 people in urban design. Now 800 feet in Vancouver is good enough for a mother, a father, 3 kids, a cat, maybe a dog. Here, twice the number of people are being crowded into one puny suite. How is this possible? Where is the innovation? Turns out the innovation consists of joining 3 rooms into one. The kitchen, the dining room, and the living room are now all in one small space, leaving one with the impression that the architects are deriving this innovation while they were walking around the IKEA showroom. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate it. Speaker number 3 is Neil Kendall-Gonkar by phone, I believe. Not on the line at the moment. Okay, number 4, Charles Irick.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Charles. You have 5 minutes.
Hi.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so I just had to put my kids down. I'm looking after my kids today. Okay, yeah, hi, acting mayor and council. My name is Charles Irick. I'm a resident of Mount Pleasant, and I'm a member of the Vancouver Area Neighbours Association. We're an advocacy organization that emphasizes the need for more housing within Vancouver, and I'm here today to speak in favor of the proposal. I've learned a lot over the last 2 public hearing days, and I thank both council and the applicant team for that. I think the term livability gets thrown around a lot, but doesn't really have a uniform definition. We're in such a dire housing shortage, and city staff and previous councils have really pushed more and more regulation on new housing without considering the effect that is going to have on our ability to build the housing that we need. And regulations do include things like, mandatory private balconies of a certain size. Previous councils have overseen the ever-growing housing shortage in Vancouver and have really failed to take meaningful action. Even this council has been timid and celebrated a multiplex proposal that was initiated under the previous council that falls short of the province's minimum standards. Given our situation, city staff have a legitimate fear that if the housing rules are overly relaxed, then developers will continue to provide smaller and smaller units that really are going to be challenging and are considered not as desirable for people to live in. But everyone has different housing preferences and needs, and planners can't possibly know what all those are and enshrine those into regulations. Council needs to be a lot more judicious in approving housing regulations and really restrict those to how they affect to their effect on safety. Private balconies are a nice to have amenity. That's my kids. Maybe less so if they open out onto Main Street, which is very noisy and polluted, but they aren't necessary. Your objective really must be to oversee the construction of as much new housing as possible within Vancouver to address the chronic undersupply. And this means you're going to have to reconsider regulations on things like balcony and FSR limits. If we want larger apartments and larger spaces, which I think are generally preferable, we need to approve bigger buildings. And we need to find ways of reducing the costs for these developments so that they can actually get built. And part of this comes down to balconies and relaxing those requirements. So I ask you please to approve this building along with the balcony amendment and continue getting to work on making sure that Vancouver has enough housing for the people who live here and for the people who want to live here. Housing is the public benefit. Public art is great, but housing is more important. Thanks.
Great. Thanks very much, Charles. I don't see any questions for you, so thank you for speaking. Speaker number 5 by phone is Sophia Galvin.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Sophia Galvan. I've been a resident in Vancouver since 2019, and when I moved here, I was really shocked by seeing how hard it is to find affordable places to live close to transit. I'm in support of these proposals for all the benefits that it will bring. We need more housing for people who already live here, but also for the next generation. I'm a young mom, and I would love to have more options for me and my family to live, especially in a neighborhood like this. I used to work here in this area and know it very well. Everything here is in walking distance, and SkyTrain is very close by. Right now I live in Kitsilano, and I know that we're lucky that we have a somewhat affordable apartment. And while I want to move closer to Mount Pleasant, the lack of options make it really hard to move. I want to see more rental options be built everywhere, especially close to transit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your comments were short but clear. Thank you. Appreciate it. Speaker number 6, also by phone, is Sherry Chen.
No.
Nope. Okay, we'll move on to speaker 7 by phone, Harpreet Virk.
Hello?
Hi, is that Harpreet?
Hi, yeah, this is Harpreet.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You have 5 minutes to speak to council. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you. Acting Mayor and Council, I'm speaking in support of this project. I've lived and rented in this city my whole adult life. I've never owned a car, and I'm a proud Compass card owner. I've lived in Mount Pleasant for 3 years now, and in the summer, I bike to work downtown. In the winter, I walk to the SkyTrain station, and I take the train in. It's literally so easy to get around in this city without a car, so sometimes I wish more people would do it. I rent in an older building pretty close to where the project is, and it would be nice to have some newer rental units in the area for a few reasons. First, and selfishly, I would love an upgrade at some point. There aren't a lot of new rental units available in Mount Pleasant, and when they do come on the market, you are in competition with like 20 other people. So that's really hard.
Speaker, I'm sorry. Can I just pause you for a minute? Can I just ask our counselors online to turn their video on, because otherwise we have lost quorum?
Not a problem.
Sorry. Well, we'll give you the time. I'm going to stop your timer just while we make sure we've got.
It's all good.
People. Hang on. Oh, great. Okay, we're fine. We now have quorum again. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So secondly, I just think more rental housing is needed in Vancouver. We are in a housing crisis, and it is really hard to find a place to live in this city, especially on a $50,000 a year salary. It's super tight. And thirdly, I think if we had more rental units, that might be an attractive option for renters who can afford to pay a bit more. And, you know, that might open up some older units that might be a bit cheaper for those who need them. So on that note, I just love my neighborhood, and I love Vancouver, and I want to stay here, but sometimes it can be really tough. So on that note, I hope council says yes to this project, and I know you usually hear a lot from other people against these things, but I hope you will consider the perspectives of people like me who actually need the accessibility of housing. I think it's a safe place to live, and having a safe place is the most important thing, and I believe that the City of Vancouver and opening more rental housing units like this project would be amazing and so beneficial for the community. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope you say yes to this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking the time to call in. Appreciate it. Speaker number 8, Susan Keir, also in person. Kerr?
On the phone?
On the phone, sorry. You switched to phone. Okay, sorry, I had a note in person.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Susan Keir, and I'm a 47-year resident of Mount Pleasant, and I'm opposed to the construction of this building as it has been proposed thus far. Here are some of my reasons why. I think its excessive height interferes with the view corridor and is inappropriate for the neighborhood. I'm concerned about the potential health and environmental concerns regarding the fire retardant chemicals treatments for the timber. I mean, the forever environmental chemicals are already present in the Arctic and being found in the fatty tissues of mammals all over the world, and I'll remind everyone we are also mammals. I'm also concerned about what's happening with the industrial and already existing businesses when site by site in the area, the development and construction rezoning of sites seems to me like they're going to be displacing them, and where are they going to go? And my main personal focus today is with regards to the zero allowance included in the proposal for vehicle parking. 20 years ago, my neighbors and I proposed permit parking to the city for the residential parking on our block, as even then, that long ago, parking could be pretty difficult during regular daytime business hours. And now, with the more recent, during the last couple of years, redevelopment and construction in our neighborhood, parking is a terribly contentious issue. It's
quite bad already, and I think it's pretty naive to suggest anything other than that if there is no room for parking on the streets, then there will be no room for parking in the neighborhood. So how I really feel about it is, it's been my neighborhood of 47 years. It's a community, and I think that the construction of this building is invasive and in an inappropriate location. And as a resident, I don't want to have our neighborhood to develop into Mount Unpleasant. So thank you all for listening today, and I hope things work out for everyone's best interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. Appreciate that. Speaker, I don't see any questions for you. Speaker number 9 is Stephen Tolnai. By phone? No. Okay, speaker 10. Agnalka Mandula. No. Okay, speaker 12, Russell Wong. He's here. Yay. Hi, Russell. You have 5 minutes when you're ready.
And I have a short slide presentation.
Okay, just give staff a second to bring that up, please.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Hello, my name is Russell Wong. I'm here to speak in support of the 2015 Main Street rezoning and also to speak in support of the city waiving the requirement for balconies for this mass timber project. So that was option number 3. I should say that I do not work in real estate or development, and I'm not here speaking on behalf of anyone who does. Housing in next slide, please. Housing in Vancouver is terribly scarce and expensive, making everyone worse off. This project will add 210 purpose-built rental apartments with 20% non-market. It's 500 meters from a new SkyTrain station, and the 25-story height is consistent with the Broadway plan for this particular zone. There's no displacement of existing renters. As always, adding more new housing frees up existing housing. When this project is completed and occupied, that'll be 210 fewer households competing with everyone else to try to find a place to live. This project will be mass timber with cross-laminated slabs of wood forming massive beams that can match the performance of concrete and steel. This has 2 advantages. One is that construction is much faster because materials can be fabricated precisely off-site and then assembled quickly on-site. Another is that there's much less carbon emissions compared to concrete. Next slide, please. Cross-laminated timber originated in Europe. In North America, it's relatively new, so we don't have a lot of experience with it, but it appears to be worth pursuing. The other local example of a high-rise mass timber building is Brock Commons at UBC, completed in 2017. If you ask people what it's like to live in Brock Commons, they say that it's basically like living in any other high-rise. It makes sense to me to support the architect's request to waive the requirement for each apartment to have its own private balcony. This would mean punching a lot of holes into the building envelope, increasing the risk of water intrusion. If City Council isn't willing to waive the requirement, it sounds like the project will need to switch to concrete construction to reduce the risk, which will require a lot of expensive rework. If anything, going back and requiring further negotiations seems even worse. I'm wondering why the city needs to mandate balconies in the first place. People like balconies, and they're willing to pay about 10% more to live in an apartment with a balcony. So why not just leave it to the project and to future renters to figure out if it makes sense to include a balcony or not? This isn't something that's difficult for a layperson to judge. It's not like food or water safety. Nobody's going to rent an apartment without a balcony and then say, hey, wait a minute, I thought this place had a balcony. I understand that City Council is looking for ways to reduce costs. Having a balcony mandate means that city staff have to spend a lot of time enforcing it and negotiating possible waivers. This is very labor intensive and therefore expensive. Next slide, please. This is only one of many, many regulations that the city has in place. The general principle here is that there's no such thing as a free lunch. Someone has to pay for all this work. When city staff are spending a lot of time enforcing these regulations, it's either paid by taxpayers or the costs are recovered and charged to the project, which means that rents will need to be higher. I would suggest that the city really needs to exercise restraint in adding new regulatory requirements. This is really critical because satisfying each regulatory requirement is always higher priority than getting new housing built. It doesn't matter if it's to protect birds or trees or shadows or what. Until each and every requirement on the list is satisfied, approval cannot be granted. So every time you add a new regulatory requirement, housing goes further down the list of priorities. There's a major cost-saving opportunity here for the city to review and prioritize its long list of existing regulations and to recommend lower priority ones for removal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Russell. I don't see any questions, but appreciate your remarks today. Okay, registered speaker 13 is Austin Kaur. I'm sure I may not be pronouncing that correctly.
Hello?
Hi, Austin. We can hear you. You have 5 minutes to speak to council.
Great, thank you. Hi, my name is Austin Shore. I'm a salmon habitat biologist at Raincoast Conservation Foundation. I am 26 years old, and I live 2 blocks away from this project. I'm speaking in support of the application. I'm encouraged that it is using net zero and mass timber principles, although I would suggest that there's a high degree of oversight, compliance monitoring, and transparency regarding the use of offsets, because there's a lot of literature that suggests that carbon offsets do not end up offsetting the actual amount of carbon promised. Secondly, I actually applaud the lack of car parking. This should be a new standard for developments within a close proximity to SkyTrain and transit, such as this development. There's a lot of bike parking, which is great for encouraging people out of cars. Building parkades is very expensive and requires carbon-intensive concrete. Next, I am pleased to see a few pages on the development application on stormwater management in the design documents. But I would suggest that management of rainwater is a top priority for this site because it is of a high grade, it's within the historical Falls Creek watershed, and its proximity to major streets can create runoff concerns. So I would argue that there needs to be more priority placed on infrastructure in place to not only capture and store rainwater, but also treat it. This could be greater use of green space, native plantings. The drawings currently have a lot of pavement in the public realm. And I would also consider the permeability of materials used. With traditional asphalt, there's a greater risk of runoff and greater stress on water treatment infrastructure. If we make the investments now on stormwater management, it would pay off in the long run by protecting our water treatment plants and by limiting the incidence of CSOs. And so lastly, on a personal aspect, as someone who lives in the area, I would ask those who are in support of balcony requirements if they have ever even been in a balcony in a building that's next to a busy street, as this building is on Main Street. I live on Quebec Street. I have a balcony, and it is extremely underused due to heavy traffic noise from the road below. Having a balcony on this intersection would just be unpleasant. So we should really be thinking about how balconies fit into the context of where the building is, and requiring them for all buildings does not seem like the right way to go. And again, I just want to thank all the other speakers who came here to support. It's hard as a young person to find housing here. More housing is always needed, and this building does it right with sustainability, with no parking, and a great public realm. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Austin. Appreciate your comments. Our last registered speaker is number 15, Rodney Clark, who is here in person.
Hi there. Thank you for letting me speak on behalf of, I've been a longtime resident of Mount Pleasant. I'm a small business owner. I've lived in Mount Pleasant since 1982, and I presently reside across the street from where this present development will be going in. So I can tell you that for the last 3 or 4 years, or 5 or 6 years, we've had an unending stream of construction around us. We had the Eleanor built at 5th and Main. Main Alley has been in construction for the last couple of years, and there's now yet another development at 4th and Quebec, which is currently under construction as we speak. And I can tell you, as a resident, I'm just frazzled. I'm really fatigued with all of the. Every project comes with a gamut of. First of all, there's excavation. You have to dig the hole. You've got dump trucks. You've got cement trucks. You've got all the ancillary work that goes on in the development of a project. It takes years to complete. One is done. The next one comes along, and frankly, I'm just tired of the whole thing. All this talk of balconies, and I thought this was about rezoning. I thought we were still trying to consider whether or not we're going to rezone this area. I applaud the efforts of the earlier speakers who showed me these slides. I'm awestruck when I see the size of this building and the footprint that it's going to take, this pencil tower comes up out of nowhere. Where did this come from, this concept? I'm not going to stand before you and pretend that I understand financialization, capitalization, and all these kind of things, but I do have to ask, who's really going to benefit from this building? I think it's the developers. I think it's the architects, the real estate companies, the bankers, the investors. They seem to be the ones that are behind this. It's return on investment for them. That seems to be the principal driving factor. And beyond that, the shadow study really intrigues me too, because I see a building that's 25 stories tall. I don't know, is that 250 meters? That comes, depending on the angle of the sun, we're going to be living in the shadow of that building from the time the sun comes up, it swings across, it goes around, and then the sun goes down. Well, I live across the street from that. I live at 234 East 5th, right behind the Eleanor that was just built, in the building called the Granite Block. It's a small building, 18 suites. And so all I know is I'm going to be living in the shadow of that for the next, if this goes through, anyways, I'm diametrically opposed to this project, and that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. There are no questions for you, but appreciate your comments. So that brings us to the end of the registered speakers list. And at this point, I'm going to go back through the speakers list. No, I'm not. We're not doing that now. They can call in. Okay. So I'm now going to make our third and final call for speakers. And if there are any speakers for this item who wish to speak to council, so again, you can call toll free 1-8333-353-8610, followed by participant code 1061445#. Before we close the speakers list, that number is available on X and on the live stream. And any speakers who are in a council chamber can come forward at this time. We will take a 5-minute recess to allow for any additional speakers, and council, we will return at 4:26. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do we have Councillor Dominato online? Great. Okay, Council. We have two. Okay, Council, welcome back. It appears that we do have additional speakers. So I will ask the clerk to read out our next speaker.
Yes, there is a speaker on the line.
Okay, speaker, can we ask you to identify yourself and if you're a resident of Vancouver, and you'll have 5 minutes to speak.
Hi, I'm Peter Dowdy. I'm a Vancouver resident and I'm also a member of the Vancouver Area Neighbours Association. And I'm calling in to urge Council to support this proposal and to select option 3. I lived in Mount Pleasant for many years, and while I have since moved, it's still a pretty special neighborhood for me. I'm a regular at Cranky Cafe and Cardam's Donuts and Whisk. I go to the community center all the time for painting lessons. The brewery row is excellent, and I make sure to come out for the Mural Fest every year. When somebody asks me what the great things are to do or see in Vancouver as a tourist, I always point them to the seawall near Olympic Village. It's a great neighborhood, and I really think that more people should be able to live there. Ultimately, we're talking about whether or not we're going to approve or send back to staff based on community benefit. But we're in a housing crisis. What we're short on is housing. Housing is our community benefit. I think that we should let people make their own housing choices, and I really question the wisdom of trying to force balconies into this project. There are a lot of things that are nice about this neighborhood, but I'd say that the noise and pollution coming off of Main Street is not one of them. And if my residents had a device for bringing that noise and pollution into my home, I would consider that a disamenity. We have a lot of requirements that we impose on building that we've built up over decades of city planning from a different era. But the times are changing. This is a mass timber building. It's part of this innovative change in how the province wants to do building, and we should err on the side of accepting these projects and pushing them forward. We don't want to be the council that put the brakes on BC's new model of housing development. BC's already nationally renowned for how forward-thinking and experimental we are. We don't want to be the council that created the new leaky condo scandal, only this time because we mandated a bunch of mass timber balconies that, you know, designers and architects have said really don't make sense. We have a choice here between the way we used to do things and making a strong stand for housing, and we should choose the latter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time. You do not have any questions, but thanks for calling in. And clerks, we have one more speaker.
I'm just double checking. No.
Okay. All right. So seeing as there are no additional speakers, the speakers list will now be closed. And seeing as there are little or no public comments received after 2 p.m., I'm also now closing the receipt of public comments. And at this point, does the applicant have any closing comments you'd like to make? Yes.
I'll keep it brief. We've been here a long time, but we've been 4 years working with staff to get where we are here today. We plead with the council to please either accept our amendment or pass the resolution that was originally by staff, and we'll do a concrete building. So I'm going to pass our amendment one more time.
Okay, we do have that, and it was received.
Okay, and I just want to make one quote to end this with. For those of you who don't know, I work with the United Nations. I'm Canada's premier advocate for refugees. And I'm going to close with a quote from the United Nations on the work we've been doing on climate change. Climate change is the defining issue of our time, and we are at a defining moment. The choices we make in the next years will play a critical role in deciding the future of our planet and the next generations to come. And this project is an attempt in our little way to contribute to that helping our planet. We're also in a housing crisis here in Vancouver, and we urge you to please approve the project with this amendment so we can move forward and be good citizens, both globally and for the citizens of Vancouver. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the comments. And now looking to staff. Does staff have any closing comments? I see we do have one.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So first off, I'd like to recognize the applicant for bringing forward this innovative project. It's definitely a good project that way. However, staff are still supporting our original recommendation of approving the project with the conditions written, noting that it provides an alternative at the development permit stage to take into account financial viability for this particular design. If the owner chooses not to proceed at he could choose to proceed at that stage or not, if council does approve it as it is written. Staff do not agree with the assertions that mass timber cannot deliver balconies. We have 11 mass timber submitted applications, and they all include balconies. There are also examples of existing mass timber buildings that have been built with balconies, and I'm aware of 3 over 17 stories and 25, and there's a 25-story one in Wisconsin. If council does amend the condition to remove this requirement, it would be unlikely that we'd be able to require private balconies on future mass timber buildings, as council approval here sets a bit of a precedent. Staff would not recommend council change policy to enable just one project, as much as this project is innovative and interesting. Council has required balconies for a long time, recently approved policy to include balconies on the Broadway plan, and staff will be bringing a comprehensive review of apartment livability issues for council's consideration early in 2025. Therefore, council will have an opportunity to consider balconies at that time. Council approved close to 7,000 secured rental units last year, and we anticipate exceeding that number this year. So we do hope this project does proceed, but if the applicant chooses not to pursue this development, staff are confident this block will redevelop and the Broadway plan will require rental at this location. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. At this point, because I'd like to be in a situation to be able to participate in the proceedings and move an amendment when we get to that stage, I'd like to suggest to council, with the will of council, that the next acting mayor in line, Councillor Meisner, take over, unless there are any objections from council, because it does require council consensus. Nope. Okay. All right. We will switch places.
Okay, everybody, we'll just keep things moving here. Now I'd like to know if council has any questions for staff, and I see Councillor Kirby-Young on the queue for questions to staff. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just want to take a second, Chair, to see if there are any questions, because if there are not, I'd like to move the recommendations, and then subsequently I'd like to move an amendment.
Okay, so Councillor Kirby-Young moved the recommendations, seconded by Councillor Klassen. And then Councillor Kirby-Young, you indicated you'd like to move an amendment, is that correct?
And I have sent that in to the clerks.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to move us to the amendment queue. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I think this was a good discussion for council to have, and I appreciate the fact that staff are doing their job with respects to consistently applying our existing and current policy. I think that we are in a challenging time in terms of the economics of building the type of housing we need and building rental housing, which is intersecting with, I think, new technology with the use of mass timber, which is also a stated aspiration of this council to see some of those projects move forward. I appreciate there's different points of view on that staff have said there are some timber buildings coming forward that have balconies, and then the impassioned, if I can characterize it that way, delivery from the architect that they wouldn't want to put their name on this because there's a concern that the technology is unproven. And so I do think that we're seeing a lot of interest in mass timber, but not necessarily a lot of projects coming to fruition. And so I think what we have here is an intersection between a desired, desperately needed type of housing, which is rental housing. This is a couple hundred units, 20% below market, so about 40 units. So we're getting housing. We're getting the 20% below. There's about 2.3 million in DCLs that are coming forward, which is a significant contribution that can support public benefit strategy. And the ability, I think, to look at mass timber projects of a different approach and actually see how that goes and how that works. I appreciate that it's hybrid and we have the concrete core, but that is sort of where we are at here. But if we don't push the envelope, we're not necessarily going to know what's possible. And this is, I think, a piece where our different goals in terms of housing, affordability, and sustainability are intersecting. And so we're trying to find, I think, the appropriate nexus there as a council. And I certainly don't want to see the project delayed further. 4 years is too long, quite frankly, to be discussing a project like this. I also appreciated staff's comments that they're coming back with sort of a review of the livability piece. I find personally that these public hearings are kind of real life case studies that can help to inform some of that policy review, because that's where you get a chance to kind of see where the rubber hits the road and where the friction points are sometimes in terms of trying to bring those pieces together. But to wait another year on that, I think, is too long. And it would be, I think the project does have a lot of merits there. I'm interested to see what the communal space looks like. Balconies are important for livability, but they do have constraints on main streets. And I also noticed that this has opening floor-to-ceiling windows, which allow people to have that light and access to fresh air, which I think is an important piece of it. So, I should also say, before I run out of time, that the spirit of this amendment is, which I believe is on screen, but just for people that are listening along, is to strike the viability of mass timber construction will only be considered striking for 1 and 2 bedroom units if the applicant demonstrates that they provide 50% of the required balcony area, and to offset that reduction to 50% of the current policy area, that additional, oh, I'm sorry, this isn't the right one, is it? Sorry, I think the clerks have brought up, wait a second.
Is
Sure, I'm reading
sorry to interrupt you, the amendment on the screen is not the correct amendment?
No, that one is correct, sorry. I was looking at a different one.
Okay.
And that, alternatives to private outdoor space for all dwelling units be provided through potentially communal space and other options as is indicated there. So that's the spirit of the amendment. I think is council using its discretion to move us forward on housing while some of the policy updates are done, and also, quite frankly, to get some real life case studies of what's working. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Happy to second. Great. So that was moved by Councillor Kirby-Young and seconded by Councillor Klassen. Thank you. So Councillor Carr.
Yes, I wonder, Chair, if I could ask a point of information through to staff.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Staff, I am interested in knowing what your analysis is of the removal of the language in Part 2 of the condition of approval, where it says that there's basically it takes out the minimum floor area, so that which had been calculated, I gather, based on the removal of 1 bedroom and units. So would the floor area, if you calculated it for 2 and 3 bedroom units, just be more floor area than possible to create an open space? I'm not sure.
There's no impact on the base building size.
Right.
The amendment speaks to balconies and only balcony area only. And through the strikeouts, it would allow the building to have communal balconies in a way that the applicant has presented through the presentation, and have that play itself out in a number of options, either in private Juliet balconies, communal balconies, or common outdoor rooftop amenity areas, or combination of all those. So it would be worked out at the development permit stage. They'd not be required to meet the minimum balcony percentage or amount at all.
Okay. I'm just, there was a requirement that's now struck out that had at least a minimum size, so I just was concerned about that. What you're telling me is that it still would proceed with those open area spaces, the Juliet balconies, communal balconies, would still be all part of this because that's what's being presented to you. Is that correct?
It could be. There just wouldn't be a minimum size or amount of them to be declared to the development.
Right. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. I'm going to speak in support of the amendment then, and I just really want to, I guess, make the clear point that, you know, when we move with new innovative ways of construction in the city, I believe it's important to test out what might be problems or not problems. And I will remind everybody of the leaky condo crisis within this city, where seemed fine at the time, but look at the impact on people, building owners, et cetera. Like, it was hugely horrendous. We didn't know at the time that architectural design and style of building would lead to that kind of income. We're a city of rain, probably more rain that we're going to get in the future because of climate change. So I think it's worth it, knowing we have some buildings that are going to put balconies in, that are mass timber, to look at their performance compared to the performance where we don't do that, on the suspicion that potentially there could be a problem in terms of rain leaking into the building core. So I'm willing to take the risk of that, knowing and believing that developers will not use this as an excuse to give up open space for the benefit of the families and people who live in the buildings, that or give up balconies entirely, because they are, and they tend to be, something that's desirable in the marketplace. So I'd like to see the performance, and you can't do that unless you approve this difference. And so that's why, and obviously because we are just beginning to do mass timber, and the alternative, if we didn't do this change, would have been going to a concrete building. We've got enough concrete buildings. We really need to move on with some other methods of building housing in the city and buildings in the city that really pays attention to the climate crisis. I absolutely believe Gregory Enriquez stays tall, that this tall wood movement is one in evolution, and the climate crisis is the defining crisis of our times. So let's see what the outcome is.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So also thanks, Councillor Kirby, for bringing forward this amendment. I'm going to speak in support of this amendment as well. Also, thanks for staff for preparing this project for council. I understand the great intention of following the rules for the Broadway plan. I know you have to do that, so I really appreciate all the effort and dedication. But I think the recommendation are not bold enough. I think mass timber project is still a relatively new technology in this construction industry. Of course, there are challenges, same as any applications of new technology. We should give the new technology an opportunity to further evolve, develop, and refine. Mandate the balcony requirement may potentially kill this new technology, which will send a wrong signal to other mass timber projects, or perhaps to other new technology as well. So I really hope this amazing project does not turn into another concrete building. So in fact, I don't know why we have the requirement of balcony as a mandate at the beginning. My personal opinion is this is a decision. We should leave that to the free market, to the customer to decide, just like the parking minimal requirements. The less regulation governments get involved like this, the better. Is this the project without balcony for everyone? Of course not. But we have to understand the diverse housing needs across the city. I'm pretty sure in this city, we can easily find more than 200 families in the city. They are okay with living in a condo without a balcony. That means 200 less families in the city that are desperately looking for a place to live under this housing crisis. I think when we have tens of thousands of families cannot even find a place to live, and they have to move out of the city, now we are debating about a balcony. I find this is just pretty ironic. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to support this amendment. And also, I'm a little bit upset why the public benefit cannot be included procedure-wise. So, but anyway, I'm going to, I really look forward to this amazing building come to reality. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Councillor Joe. Councillor Klassen.
Chair, can I move that we extend to complete this item after 5?
Yep, just need a seconder. Okay, and all in favor, say aye. Great, none opposed. Okay.
Thanks very much, Chair. So just going to the amendment, I think we have a really important work that comes from projects like this.
First of all, it supports innovation. Innovation is what we're looking for, both in terms of policy, but in terms of building typology and form. This is this hybrid mass timber, which I haven't determined. I think is this the tallest one that we could conceivably. I'm seeing some nods and thumbs up over there. So we are moving into new territory. The fact that there was a provincial imperative otherwise wouldn't sway me, but the fact is that we are all together as a province looking at the possibilities of mass timber and wood construction, and the fact that that those dollars are put into do that research, I think it really matters in the scope of this project. We also face some potential risks by being on the vanguard of a project like this. And noting Councillor Carr's, I think, really germane comments around climate change and the fact that we're seeing a succession of atmospheric errors right now. We live in a rainforest, and there's no getting around the fact that water has had some profound impacts on different kinds of construction over the years. I used to live in a building where the balconies themselves became rotten and required a special assessment. I also want to just note that the design itself is, I think, really unique and exciting, and it will really add to the landscape here. So I have more thoughts about this one, but I just want to speak to the amendment itself. On the matter of the balconies, clearly council were earlier in the meeting today trying to address what could be perceived as an additional sort of floor space that would be gained by this. But as Councillor Joe pointed out, it really is down to, and some of the speakers too, letting the residents decide themselves. And truthfully, I don't think this will be something that will sway future developments from having balconies, provided the balconies are the right feature for buildings. On a street like this, we heard about the street noise. The air quality is not necessarily great. It might be better to have the communal balconies that are set back from the city that have some of the ability to gather. The social isolation piece is absolutely huge to me. The fact that we are able to create more common spaces for people to get to know their neighbors in a building like this is an upside as well. And of course, we've heard concerns about parking that came with this project, but that is, I think, again, what the market will decide a little bit. And we have an immense amount of rapid transit development going on in this community. So I am going to be supporting this amendment, and I look forward to hearing what my other fellow councillors have to say. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Klassen. Councillor Montague.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just first of all, just a point of information. I noticed there's a yellow memo attached. Does that need to be moved as well?
We'll just check with the clerks on that.
I don't know if it has.
You're referring to the yellow memo that was brought up at that would be in the main motion, and we should get clarification when we get back to the main motion that
Doesn't
that
have
was
to move the amendment,
included.
just the main motion. Okay. Thanks. I just want to make sure we didn't miss that. I'll be very brief. I don't want a situation where no balconies become the norm. However, livability, I think, is a term that means something different to everyone depending on where they are in life. So I will agree with, I think, pretty much everything my colleagues have said before me here, and I'm going to support the amendment.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Montague. Okay, not seeing anyone else on the queue to speak to the amendment, so we can now call the vote. Clerks, if you could please take us to the voting panel. And Council, if you could please register your vote on the voting panel. Okay, that passes unanimously. Okay, we will now go back to the main queue for final discussion and closing comments before voting. So Councillor Kirby-Young, please go ahead.
Just taking the opportunity to clarify that I was moving the main motion with the yellow memo, which has now subsequently been amended.
Yes, we do need to clarify that. Yes, so just to clarify,
Thank you,
we're
Councillor
moving this with the yellow memorandum. Thanks for the reminder. Any more comments, Councillor Kirby-Young? No. Councillor Klassen.
Yeah, just really brief. I do think, again, the fact that we are looking at a new building typology, a new set of construction materials, this is the kind of building that I would only be able to dream to live in at some point. It's beautiful, and that mass timber, I think, is something that is really an exciting development in terms of what we're seeing in for future projects. But these are still early days. I noted that we have 11 buildings that are coming forward that are mass timber, but that we haven't built very many of them yet, and we haven't built anything this tall. So this hybrid mass timber form is, I think, a very exciting change that we're seeing, and we should, in a case like this where there are strong concerns around potential for water ingress that might come from the balconies, this is something that probably resulted in a lot of back and forth between our staff and the developer over the last several weeks and months. But we are poised with a decision here in council, and I think it's important that we move this project forward. We can't afford further delays. We're going to get hundreds of new rental units in a great neighborhood served by rapid transit. So with that, I would just like to be able to move forward and say that I'm very supportive of moving forward. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Klassen. Councillor Carr.
Yeah, thank you. I'll say it again. The climate crisis is the defining issue of our times. When I ran for council in 2011, I ran on two issues: the climate crisis and housing affordability. This project actually meshes both of my concerns into a solution, into a way of potentially moving forward that will lead in design and in innovation to better buildings. And that's what I want to see in this city. I love the fact that it's 100% rental. Love the fact that even that, with that, it's 20% below market, that there are no parking stalls except for the visitors and the tradespeople and whatever is needed in that regard. This is a transit neighborhood, and that's where we have to move. The solution is not going to be all EVs. We've got to get more cars off the road, and people have to use alternative green transportation, which is very much part of our climate emergency action plan in the city. So I love the mass timber. I just want everybody to realize too that not only is our city committed to moving in innovative ways to reduce embodied emissions, Metro Vancouver is doing the same thing as well. Just an item on our agenda last week around reducing, looking at ways to reduce embodied emissions. I also want to just note for the record that we as council received 335 pieces of correspondence in support of this project, 33 in opposition. I read them all, and it's the first time that this has happened. I've never seen sarcasm before in a piece of correspondence from a member of the public, but I'm going to read it out to you because it was quite clever. The person says, and unfortunately they were on the opposed side, they said, or that's the way it was categorized. I oppose this building so that we can maintain the housing crisis in Vancouver. Very clever. So just also to a note really for those people pursuing the building of this, the livability will be key. That open space where people can convene, can meet each other, where children can play, where, there's a socialization that goes on, that community can be built is going to be really critical. So I look forward to one day being at the opening of it, but we'll be, of course, supporting.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Carr. Councillor Dominato.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you just to start acknowledging Councillor Kirby-Young for bringing forward the amendment to this project. I do want to, at the outset, just acknowledge as well the speakers who came to speak to us today to share their, some of them in support, some of them in opposition, their considerations, and those who also wrote to us. Just to echo some of the comments here today, there is no doubt the opportunity that lies in adopting and using mass timber and hybrid mass timber construction My colleagues before me have spoken about the environmental sustainability benefits in terms of addressing embodied carbon, having a lower carbon footprint, also using a renewable resource in terms of wood. And so, and it also aligns very nicely with our sustainability and climate goals as a city. We also know that there's enormous benefits in terms of city building, in terms of the ability to reduce construction times, opportunities for affordability, as well as fire safety. That's also an opportunity that is reflected in the use of mass timber projects. And also just acknowledging that it's also a real benefit to our local economy. That's something we haven't touched on in great detail today, but that we have companies right here in BC that are doing, producing the wood for mass timber construction. We're also have the highest spend in terms of the supply chain in this space. And so there's other spin-off benefits, but speaking specifically to the project, I think what we ended up spending a lot of time on, and it speaks to the amendment that Councillor Kirby-Young brought, is the trade-offs that have emerged in this discussion around wanting to support innovation. This project is supported by the province. It is part of one of a number of mass timber pilot projects in the province. And one of the trade-offs here we discussed was the building and balconies and inclusion or not including them. And I think that is one of the ongoing conversations that we'll be having as we densify and in our city. And I'm happily supported the amendment, but also happy to support this project. I think there'll be lots to learn from it. And I think that was really the intent and the driver behind the province's investment. I remember talking about this project probably 2.5 years ago at a Council of Forest Industries conference and highlighting it as an example that when we've been looking at potentially, and again, there are others, as Councillor Clausen noted, in the queue that are coming forward, and look forward to looking at those, but I am happy to support this one today.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Dominato. I will need to cede the chair to make some comments of my own, and just looking for agreement that I could cede the chair to Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Meisner. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks so much. So lots has been covered already today with comments from my colleagues, but I really believe that this is an innovative, groundbreaking project and a very important project for Vancouver and also for our climate goals and our housing goals. So this is going to add a significant amount of rental housing, 210 rental units. It's been mentioned several times about its proximity to transit. It's close to Main Street Science World, of course, but it's also close to 2 new Broadway line subway stations, so Great Northern Way and the station we'll see at Mount Pleasant. So this is a really connected location, and that really does allay my fears over the lack of parking. I think that most people who will choose to live here probably won't drive anyways, so I'm not too concerned about that. I feel that this is a really walkable, transit-friendly location. And as well, active transport, there's great bike lanes nearby. On the balcony piece, I have personal experience living in a high-rise downtown from the late 90s that didn't have balconies, and I didn't miss it, to be perfectly honest with you. I now live in a newer building that has balconies. Try to use it as much as I can, but for 10 months of the year, I don't use it. So I think the communal balconies are a really good compromise in order to make this project move forward. And just to be clear, I think that this compromise, we're only making this compromise because this is a mass timber hybrid building that delivers a significant number of rental units and below market units. We're not doing this for your average concrete tower. This is really in recognition of the importance of getting this project moving. The applicant mentioned this has been 4 years in the making, and I really don't want to see any more delays in a housing crisis and a climate crisis. We just got to get on with it, and there'll be lots of learnings, I think, from this project in order to inform future mass timber projects. So really, really supportive of this, and really pleased to vote in favor of it today. Thank you. Councillor Kirby-Young, I'll
thanks.
I guess I'll pass the chair back to you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks. Seeing no one else on the queue at this point, I'll ask the clerk to take us to a vote. Okay, and I might get the clerk to read that vote just because we're playing musical chairs. So that has passed with none in opposition and Councillor Boyle and Mayor Sim absent and Councillor Fry declaring conflict. So that concludes the business for the reconvened public hearing today. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Klassen, seconded by Councillor Joe. None opposed? Seeing none. Okay, that concludes it. Thanks, everybody.